The alarms began screaming before anyone understood why. Inside the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, light panels flickered from calm blue to violent red. Translators overlapped into noise. Delegates rose from their seats in panic, wings flaring, limbs locking, skin shifting color in fear responses their species had not shown in centuries. Defense officers shouted over each other. Unknown mass signatures. No, correction, confirmed fleet. No, multiple fleets. A senior tactician froze as new data flooded the central display. They're exiting hyperspace, inside restricted orbit. That alone was impossible. No species jumped that close to a populated system. The energy shear would tear ships apart. Yet the display is filled with shapes. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. The ships were wrong. They were too solid, too dense, scarred with heat burns and impact fractures that suggested they should not still be flying. Some were mismatched, asymmetrical, clearly repaired many times over. None carried ceremonial markings. None followed standard formation doctrine. They moved like predators that did not care if they were seen. A voice cut through the chamber, shaking. Identify origin. The answer arrived instantly, and it made the room fall silent. Fleet registry confirms. Sol system. A pause. Earth. Shock rippled through the delegates. That could not be correct. Humans were not a military power. They were a minor species. Late arrivals, fragile, divided, dependent on council trade lanes and protection treaties. They argued loudly, negotiated poorly, and bled resources faster than they produced them. Humanity was inconvenient, not dangerous. A junior analyst whispered what many were thinking. Earth shouldn't have ships like that. The first defense ring fired. Energy lances screamed across space, precise and overwhelming, enough to shatter moons. The Council had crushed rebellions with less. The human fleet did not slow. Several ships were struck directly. Hulls ruptured. Entire sections vaporized. They kept coming. No evasive maneuvers. No counterfire. They advanced through the barrage like the damage did not matter. Then the human fleet fired back. Not with elegant beams or synchronized volleys. With everything. Kinetic slugs the size of buildings. Missile clouds that broke apart into smaller clouds, then smaller still. Weapons that overloaded shields through sheer repetition. Council defense grids began to fail, not from a single blow, but from exhaustion. One by one, the outer platforms went dark. A systems officer screamed, "They're targeting command relays, not population centers." Another voice followed, almost disbelieving. "They're ignoring our hails. All frequencies. All languages." A single signal appeared on the display. Old. Narrowband. Repeating. Audio only. The Council's translators hesitated, then flagged it as ancient human origin, decades out of date. The chamber amplified the sound. At first, it was only static. Then a calm human voice cut through. "This is Earth." The words echoed through the chamber. The message repeated, unchanged. "This is Earth." No demands. No threats. No explanation. A council elder leaned forward, eyes fixed on the burning tactical map. "Why would they come here like this?" the elder asked. "We never declared war." No one answered. Because buried deep in council archives, files no one reviewed anymore, was a vote. A quiet decision. A calculated absence. But the humans were not speaking of it yet. Another defense ring collapsed. Human ships broke through and began deploying smaller craft, boarding vessels, signal disruptors, precision strike units. The council chamber shook as distant impacts reached the station's hull. A strategist finally voiced the fear forming in every mind. They aren't here to negotiate. The human transmission changed. For the first time, something new appeared beneath the words. A timestamp. It was old. Very old. Older than the first attacks on Earth. Older than the last unanswered distress call. Older than the silence. "This is Earth," the voice repeated. Then, quietly, one more line followed. "You did not answer." The chamber erupted into chaos. As emergency lights failed and the great council station began its slow evacuation, one truth settled over every species present. Whatever the humans had become, whatever they had endured, they had not come for permission. And they were not leaving until something far greater than ships was destroyed. The Galactic Council had always believed its greatest strength was distance. Distance from violence. Distance from consequence. Distance from the small species whose lives were measured in short spans and shorter memories. As emergency bulkheads sealed and delegates fled the burning chamber, no one spoke of the vote. Not out loud. Most had truly forgotten it. Others had buried it under centuries of procedure, believing time itself would erase responsibility. But the humans had not forgotten. The story shifts back, far back, before the alarms, before the fleets, before the silence. Humanity's first appearance before the Council had not been dramatic. There were no weapons displayed, no threats made, only diplomats standing beneath a ceiling built for giants, trying not to show how small they were. They spoke of border raids, of unidentified fleets probing their outer colonies, of warning buoys going dark. They asked for recognition under Council law, not an alliance, not protection fleets, only inclusion. The chamber had listened politely. Then the humans were asked to leave. Behind closed doors, the tone changed. Humanity was discussed like a weather problem. Too emotional, too divided, too adaptable. A strategist noted that humans recovered from disasters too quickly, learned from defeats too well. Another warned that their population growth, combined with their habit of turning civilian infrastructure into military assets, made them unpredictable. They did not fit the models. The Council feared chaos more than cruelty. So they voted. Not unanimously. Never unanimously. But enough. Earth would not be destroyed. That would provoke attention. Instead, Earth would be isolated. Trade corridors were quietly rerouted. Patrol schedules adjusted. Early warning relays reclassified as redundant. When requests for assistance arrived from Sol space, they were flagged, delayed, misplaced. No announcement was made. The Council called it stability. When the first alien fleet crossed into human territory, no alarms echoed in the Great Chamber. No delegates rose in outrage. The Council did nothing because, officially, nothing was happening. Humanity fought alone. At first, they believed it was a mistake. Messages were sent. Requests logged. Coordinates transmitted again and again. Then came the realization that no reply was coming. The narration returns to Earth during those early years of abandonment. Cities watched the sky more than the ground. Shipyards ran without pause. Old satellites were dragged back into orbit and patched together because new ones could not arrive. Human leaders argued, as they always had. But something changed. They stopped arguing about who was responsible. They began arguing about how long they had. The first planetary defense failure killed millions. The second killed hope that help would arrive. That was the moment humanity understood the truth. The galaxy had already moved on, and if they survived, it would not be because someone allowed it. The war that followed was not glorious. Human fleets lost more than they won. Colonies were glassed, then abandoned. Entire generations grew up knowing evacuation drills better than history lessons. But humans adapted. They stopped building ships meant to look impressive. They built ships meant to keep working after half their systems failed. They learned that a vessel that could still fire with one engine and no atmosphere was more valuable than a perfect one that died cleanly. Civilian transports were redesigned to be stripped and refitted in days. Mining lasers became weapons. Cargo holds became barracks. Humanity did not grow stronger. They grew harder. The Council, distant and comfortable, noticed only that trade disruptions were spreading. Member species complained of delays, shortages, and rising piracy. Analysts traced the disruptions back to fringe space, back to routes that once passed near Sol. Still, no one connected the pattern. Why would they? Humanity was supposed to be quiet by now. Decades passed. Then came the silence. Human signals faded from common space. Trade pings vanished. Even pirate reports stopped mentioning Sol. The Council filed the region as depopulated or irrelevant. The vote, already old, became meaningless. And in that silence, humanity did something the Council never expected. They stopped asking when the galaxy would help. They asked what the galaxy depended on. Human planners studied everything they could capture, steal, or intercept. Trade law, military doctrine, Council response times, how long it took for a vote to become action. They learned that the Council did not react to suffering. It reacted to disruption. So humans planned for disruption. They mapped supply chains that fed entire sectors. They identified worlds that produced nothing but coordination, data hubs, relay nexuses, legal archives. Targets that never appeared on battle maps. Earth did not rebuild as a symbol. Earth rebuilt as a memory of being ignored. The narration returns to the present, to the burning council station. A surviving archivist, fleeing through smoke-filled corridors, accesses a sealed record to understand why this is happening. The file opens. A vote tally appears. Designation, Sol System, status adjustment. The archivist's limbs tremble. They remember. The archivist whispers. Outside the viewport, another human ship detonates under defensive fire. Its debris does not scatter. It continues forward, momentum carrying it into a relay tower, shattering the structure completely. No celebration follows. The human fleet simply advances. The archivist realizes something too late. This is not revenge. Revenge would be loud, messy, emotional. This is a correction. The Council removed humanity from the system. Now humanity is removing the system from the galaxy. As the station's lights fail completely, the human transmission continues to echo through emergency speakers. Unchanged, patient, unstoppable. This is Earth. The words are no longer a greeting. They are a reminder. And for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council understands what it means to be unheard. The first invasion of Earth was meant to be brief. Alien commanders believed the humans had already been weakened by isolation. Trade gone. Allies gone. No council protection. Intelligence projections showed resistance collapsing within weeks. The galaxy had seen this pattern before. Small species always broke the same way. They fought hard at first. Then they fractured. Then they begged. Earth did none of that. The first wave struck orbital defenses. Human satellites died in fire, their debris burning like falling stars. Cities watched the sky turn red. Oceans boiled where kinetic strikes hit too deep. Human command knew the truth within hours. This was not a raid. It was an erasure. Evacuation orders went out immediately, not just for civilians, but for governments, archives, and factories. Anything that could move, moved. Anything that could not be buried or burned so it could not be used against them. Human fleets rose to meet the attackers and were crushed. Then rose again. They did not attempt elegant formations or decisive engagements. They fought in fragments, in ambushes, in ugly, close-range clashes that stripped shields and tore hulls apart. They lost. They lost again. And again. The invaders recorded the losses and smiled. They believed they were watching a species die. What they did not understand was that humans were not trying to win yet. They were trying to learn. Human ships began returning fire in strange ways. Weapons were timed wrong. Angles were inefficient. It looked like panic. It was testing. Every defeat fed data into systems that never shut down. Survivors did not rest. They rebuilt while still bleeding. Cities under attack rerouted power into underground manufacturing. Transit tunnels became supply lines. Children were taught evacuation drills before they learned to read. There was no heroic speech broadcast to the planet. Only a simple message repeated across every channel. Hold if you can. Move if you must. Build what you can. When the second invasion wave arrived, it met resistance that made no sense. Human ships were worse, cruder, heavier, clearly damaged. And yet, they lasted longer. They rammed when weapons failed. They vented the atmosphere to stabilize spins. Crews fought fires with bare hands because there was no time to wait for systems. Alien commanders grew frustrated. Human ships did not retreat properly. They did not surrender. They did not follow rules of engagement that made wars predictable. They stayed in the fight long after logic said they should be dead. Entire fleets were lost buying minutes. Minutes that allowed something else to move. On the surface, human militaries stopped defending everything. They defended routes, supply tunnels, evacuation corridors, space elevators long enough for one more launch. The invaders glassed cities and declared victories. Humanity marked those cities as sacrifices and kept going. The third invasion wave brought orbital bombardment designed to end resistance completely. That was when Earth surprised them. Planetary shields, never meant to withstand that level of fire, flared to life. Not perfect, not uniform, patched together from civilian grids, experimental tech, and systems no one had approved. They failed in sections. Humans rerouted power manually. Sections went dark. Others held. Millions died. The planet did not break. Human command finally issued an order they had been delaying. Begin conversion. Everything changed. Civilian factories stopped producing consumer goods. They produced armor plating, engine parts, ammunition that fit no standard weapon but could be adapted to many. Hospitals became triage centers for rapid return to duty. Universities became design hubs. Earth stopped pretending it would go back to normal. The invaders began to notice something unsettling. Human ships destroyed early in the war started reappearing, rebuilt, rearmed, redesigned. Ships that should not exist. Some still carried scorch marks from previous battles. The realization spread slowly among the alien fleets. They were not fighting a military. They were fighting a species that treated loss as instruction. When the invaders attempted psychological warfare, broadcasting images of destroyed cities, threatening extinction, the response was silence. Then a human transmission broke through, short and unadorned. "You are not the first." The message repeated once, then cut. The invaders escalated. They targeted population centers directly, hoping to force surrender through terror. The human response was brutal and precise. Not against the fleets. Against time. Evacuations accelerated. Cities were abandoned mid-attack. Traps were left behind. Overloaded reactors, unstable structures, gravity distortions triggered only after occupation. Alien troops landed on worlds already empty and died anyway. Human commanders made a decision that changed everything. They stopped fighting to defend Earth alone. They fought to ensure something else survived. Deep beneath the planet's surface, massive structures launched. Arcs, shipyards, data vaults. Earth itself became a shield. When the fourth invasion wave arrived, they found something impossible. Human resistance had grown. Not in numbers, but in coordination. Ships moved as if expecting to die, because they were. Their goal was not survival. It was delayed. The invaders finally realized the mistake. They were not ending a war. They were funding the future of it. A human fleet commander recorded a final message as their ship lost power, enemy fire tearing through the hull. There was no speech, only a report. Enemy shields fail after sustained kinetic pressure. Recommend volume over precision. Engines tolerate overload longer than expected. Human crews remain effective past fatal thresholds. The message transmitted before the ship detonated. Earth received it. Earth archived it. Earth adapted. When the invasion finally slowed, not stopped, but stalled, the planet was unrecognizable. Scars marked continents. Orbits were clogged with wreckage. But humanity was still there. And for the first time, the invaders pulled back. Not because they were defeated, but because the cost no longer made sense. They left behind a ruined world and assumed time would finish the job. From orbit, Earth looked broken. From inside, it was more united than it had ever been. Human leaders gathered in chambers carved deep into bedrock. No flags, no speeches, no blame, only numbers. Losses counted, capabilities measured, projections drawn. One conclusion was unavoidable. If another invasion came, Earth might not survive. So Earth made a choice. Not to beg the galaxy, not to warn it, to prepare something that could not be ignored. Shipyards expanded beyond planetary orbit. Crews were trained to live in space permanently. Children born during the war grew up inside hulls and corridors, knowing stars better than skies. Earth stopped broadcasting distress calls. It began broadcasting nothing at all. To the galaxy, humanity went quiet. To itself, humanity became patient. And somewhere far away, in the comfort of council space, no one noticed that a species once labeled unstable had just learned how to endure the impossible. The galaxy noticed Earth's silence, but it did not fear it. Silence, to the Galactic Council, usually meant one thing: extinction. Trade routes that once brushed the edges of soul space went quiet. No human signals crossed common channels. No distress calls. No commerce beacons. Even pirates stopped reporting contact. The Council marked the region with a dull administrative label: non-responsive, low priority, and moved on. What the galaxy did not understand was that Earth's silence was not absent. It was compression. Inside the ruins of orbit and the scars of the planet below, humanity was changing in ways no council model could track. Human leaders stopped thinking in years. They thought in generations. Shipyards were no longer built for speed or profit. They were built for permanence. Hulls were thick, ugly, layered with redundancy instead of elegance. Systems were designed to fail without stopping the whole. Nothing relied on a single point of control. Human ships were not meant to win battles. They were meant to keep functioning while losing them. Entire populations relocated off Earth, not as refugees, but as infrastructure. Families lived inside rotating habitats welded onto fleet frames. Children learned navigation before geography. Death was common, but panic was not. This was normal now. Every human knew the same truth. No one was coming. That knowledge did something strange. It removed fear. Without hope of rescue, humanity stopped waiting for permission to survive. Decisions that once took years were made in days. Ethics boards shortened their debates. If a choice improved endurance, it was approved. Earth did not become cruel. It became focused. Old political borders faded. There was no advantage in division anymore. Resources were allocated by need, not status. The people who complained the loudest were ignored. Humanity had learned something the galaxy never had. Comfort was optional. Survival was not. Deep space listening stations replaced planetary defense grids. Humans stopped watching their own borders and began watching everyone else's. They listened. They mapped traffic flows, voting cycles, emergency response times, how long it took for a council decision to become action. The answers were disappointing. The council was slow, deliberate, predictable. It reacted to disruption, not injustice. To shortages, not suffering. Human planners marked this down without emotion. In the void between stars, massive structures assembled piece by piece. Ship hulls built around living spaces. Engines designed to run hot, loud, and far past safety margins. The fleets were not named after heroes. They were numbered, because sentiment was inefficient. Decades passed. To the galaxy, nothing changed. To humanity, everything did. The children born during the invasion grew up and took command. They did not remember Earth as peaceful. They remembered it as something that endured. They did not ask why the council stayed silent. They already knew. Human historians archived the vote they eventually uncovered. The rerouted lanes. The missing alerts. The absence that had cost billions of lives. There were no public trials. No rage-filled broadcasts. The information was simply added to the plan. Human strategy no longer asked how to defeat enemies. It asked how to remove systems. If a single world fell, the galaxy barely noticed. If logistics failed, entire regions starved. Human fleets practiced this theory quietly. They conducted exercises in deep space, cutting their own supply lines to test how long they could operate without resupply. The answer improved every year. Human engineers did not innovate for beauty. They innovated for endurance. Armor that could be patched with scrap. Weapons that could fire even when alignment was off. Command systems that assumed leadership would die and passed control automatically. Every human ship was a lesson written in metal. The silence continued. Council species grew complacent. Trade disputes replaced war alerts. Council debates focused on tariffs and representation ratios. Humanity became a footnote, a failed experiment in integration. Some junior analysts questioned the silence. They were overruled. Why worry about a dead species? Then one day, far from Earth, a council-aligned logistics hub vanished. No explosion. No distress signal. Just gone. Investigations blamed pirates. Then another relay failed. Then another. Trade delays spread. Food prices rose. Council members complained. Security forces were dispatched. They found nothing. Human fleets did not announce themselves. They did not need to. Their ships moved in ways that confused standard sensors. Not because they were stealthy, but because they did not care about being detected at long range. By the time sensors noticed them, it was too late. Targets were chosen carefully. Never population centers. Never cultural worlds. Only nodes. Relays. Shipyards. Archives. Places the galaxy depended on but never defended properly. Human strikes were brief and precise. They destroyed data, not cities. Connections, not species. Each strike was followed by withdrawal. No territory claimed. No flags planted. The galaxy began to whisper. Not about humanity. About instability. The council called emergency sessions. They debated responses. They formed committees. They did what they always did. Humanity watched. They saw how long it took for panic to become action. They saw how often decisions were delayed to protect political balance. Human planners adjusted timelines. The silence broke only once. A council patrol encountered a human vessel by accident. The human ship was damaged, engines flaring unevenly. The patrol hailed it. For the first time in decades, a human voice responded. There was no threat, no plea, only a statement. Do not follow. The patrol commander laughed. They followed. They did not return. That incident was buried. The council did not want to panic. But fear was already spreading. Trade networks grew unreliable. Entire sectors experienced shortages without understanding why. The world blamed each other. Unity weakened. Humanity had not fired a single shot at the council itself. Not yet. Because this phase was not about punishment. It was about preparation. Human fleets continued to grow, fed by generations who had never known peace. They trained knowing that survival was uncertain and purpose was not. They were not angry. Anger burned out. They were patient. And patience, applied over decades, became something far more dangerous. Deep in a human command archive, a simple question was written on a planning wall. What happens if the council stops existing? The simulations were run. The results were brutal and acceptable. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. Ruling required maintenance. They sought something simpler. Removal. As the final fleet preparations neared completion, Earth remained silent. No broadcasts. No warnings. No demands. To the galaxy, humanity was still gone. To itself, humanity was ready. And somewhere in the polished halls of the Galactic Council, comfort and routine ruled, unaware that an entire species had spent decades learning exactly how fragile that comfort truly was. The first council world did not know it was under attack. There were no alarms, no emergency broadcasts, no warning signs in the sky. Its cities were lit for the evening cycle. Trade vessels drifted through orbit lanes in neat, predictable patterns. Data relays hummed as they always had, routing commerce, votes, and laws across half a sector. Then the relays went dark. At first, administrators assumed a routine failure. Systems glitched all the time. Maintenance crews were dispatched. Backup channels activated. They failed too. Within minutes, every off-world connection vanished. No incoming traffic. No outgoing signals. No council oversight. Panic began quietly. And then the human fleet arrived. They did not exit hyperspace in a dramatic flash. They appeared at the edge of the system, engines already burning hard, vectors already set. There were fewer ships than the council expected. That should have been reassuring. Instead, the defense commanders felt something else. Unease. The human vessels moved with purpose that suggested familiarity. They did not fan out or probe. They went straight for orbital infrastructure, shipyards, refueling depots, traffic control stations. Defense platforms opened fire. Human ships did not dodge. They surged forward, absorbing damage that should have crippled them. Armor peeled away. Hulls split. Fires burned openly in vacuum. They kept firing. Missiles slammed into shield generators again and again, not powerful enough to break them alone, but enough to overload cooling systems. Kinetic rounds hammered the same points repeatedly, not to pierce, but to exhaust. The shields failed. One by one, the platforms went silent. On the planet below, citizens watched unfamiliar shapes cross the sky. Still, no message came. No demand for surrender. No declaration of war. Just destruction, focused, deliberate, and limited. Human boarding craft latched onto orbital stations. They did not slaughter crews. They shut down systems, wiped data cores, and rigged reactors to overload. Then they left. When the first explosion tore the primary shipyard apart, the planet finally understood. They were being dismantled. Not conquered. Dismantled. Council response fleets were dispatched within hours. They arrived to find wreckage, disabled infrastructure, and human ships already withdrawing. The Council declared victory. The humans had fled. What the Council did not see was the data already gone. The manufacturing capacity was erased. The trade hub was removed from the network permanently. The world still existed, but it was no longer important. Within weeks, another system went dark. Then another. Always the same pattern. Relays first. Logistics second. Defense last. Human fleets avoided prolonged engagements. If resistance was strong, they withdrew, only to return days later from a different angle, striking something else. Council admirals grew confused. This was not how wars were fought. There were no territorial gains, no attempts at occupation, no political demands, just loss. Council analysts tried to model human strategy. They failed, because they assumed humans were seeking victory. Humanity was not. They were seeking imbalance. Entire regions began to feel it. Food shipments failed to arrive. Medical supplies were delayed indefinitely. Industrial worlds discovered they could not export components needed elsewhere. Council members argued. Some accused others of hoarding. Some demanded sanctions. Some called for investigations. Votes were held. Committees formed. Human fleets continued to move. The first time a council world tried to evacuate critical infrastructure in advance, they discovered a problem. Human intelligence was faster. Every evacuation corridor they opened was already compromised. Every emergency jump route collapsed under sudden interdiction fields humans should not have had access to. Yet they did, because those routes had been mapped decades earlier. When council commanders finally managed to corner a human task force, they demanded answers. The human response came, not from a diplomat, but from a fleet operations officer. "We are not attacking your people," the human said calmly. "We are removing dependencies." The transmission cut. The task force self-destructed moments later, taking 2 council cruisers with it. Council leadership began to panic. They issued galaxy-wide alerts. They declared humanity a hostile force. They called for unity. It did not come. Too many member species were already struggling to feed their populations. Too many blamed the council for failing to protect trade. Trust eroded. Human strikes grew bolder. They began hitting archive worlds, planets whose only purpose was storing legal records, historical decisions, and council protocols. These worlds were sacred. They were never defended properly. Human boarding teams did not destroy the archives entirely. They copied them, then selectively erased critical segments. Votes disappeared. Treaties vanished. Records of authority were lost. The council's power depended on memory. Humanity understood that. One alien archivist watched helplessly as a human soldier worked methodically through a data vault. "Why are you doing this?" the archivist demanded. The human paused. "Because you did it to us," the human replied. "But we never attacked you." The human looked at the archivist for a long moment. Exactly. Across the galaxy, fear spread. Not an invasion. Of uncertainty. Worlds that had relied on council protection realized it was conditional. Worlds that had benefited from council trade realized it was fragile. Humanity had not fired on the council itself. Not yet, because they were proving something first. That the galaxy worked only because humans had not touched it. Council Military Command finally ordered a full-scale counteroffensive. Fleets gathered from dozens of systems. For the first time in centuries, the council prepared for total war. They found the human fleets waiting. The battle was brutal. Human ships died in vast numbers. Their formations collapsed under superior firepower. Entire squadrons were annihilated. The council celebrated. Then they realized the humans had targeted something else during the fight. While council fleets focused on destroying ships, human strike teams slipped through and destroyed fuel depots, repair docks, and command relays behind the lines. The council fleet won the battle and lost the campaign. Stranded ships drifted without resupply. Communication lagged. Orders conflicted. Human fleets withdrew again. They always withdrew, leaving the galaxy slightly weaker each time. Council citizens began asking questions their leaders could not answer. Why were humans never making demands? Why did they keep retreating after losing? Why did every victory make things worse? The answer, though no one wanted to admit it, was simple. Humans did not measure success in territory. They measured it in endurance. Every engagement taught them more. Every loss hardened their resolve. Every destroyed ship was replaced by 2 that worked better. And the galaxy was learning something terrifying. You could defeat humans in battle. You could not exhaust them. As the 5th Council world lost its status as a major hub overnight, a senior council official finally said the words no one else would. "We made a mistake with Earth." The room fell silent. Because mistakes could be fixed. This could not. Human fleets continued their quiet work, dismantling the systems that had once ignored them. They did not need to shout. The galaxy was already listening, and it was beginning to understand that this war would not end when one side surrendered. It would end when one side stopped existing as a system at all. The council finally decided that humanity had to be stopped, not managed. For centuries, the council's greatest fear had been chaos. Now chaos was spreading anyway, and it wore a human face. The order went out across council space. Total suppression. No retreat. No negotiation. Fleets gathered from every loyal member world. Ancient warships were pulled from reserve. Crews trained only for the ceremony were rushed into combat roles. The council promised that this time, The humans would be crushed so completely that no memory of them would remain. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity did not respond. No defiant message. No rallying cry. No warning. Only movement. Human fleets began converging on a single Council core world, one of the oldest, most fortified systems in existence. It was not a population center, but it was vital. Command nodes, legal archives, strategic coordination hubs, a place the Council believed untouchable. Alien analysts were confused. Attacking this world made no sense. The defenses were overwhelming. The losses would be catastrophic. Even a victory would cripple the attackers. Unless the attackers were willing to die. When the first human ships entered the system, Council commanders laughed. The fleet was smaller than expected. Many ships showed damage before the fighting even began. Some were clearly older designs, kept running far past any reasonable lifespan. Desperation, a Council admiral declared. They have nothing left. The battle began. Council weapons tore into the human formation. Ships vanished in fire. Hulls broke apart. Entire squadrons disappeared in seconds. The humans did not retreat. They pushed forward, engines screaming, weapons firing until mounts overheated and failed. When guns went silent, ships rammed. When engines died, drifting hulls were turned into guided weapons. Human losses climbed into the thousands, then the tens of thousands. Council commanders watched the casualty projections with satisfaction. And then confusion. The humans were not concentrating fire on the defenses. They were forcing proximity. Close enough that long-range weapons were useless. Close enough that automated systems struggled to track targets moving too unpredictably. Close enough for boarding actions. Human boarding craft slammed into Council stations under heavy fire. Many never made it. Those that did were ripped apart almost immediately. But some reached their targets. Inside those stations, the fighting was brutal and short. Humans did not advance carefully. They advanced with purpose. They disabled systems, wiped command data, and overloaded reactors. They did not attempt to survive. Council officers intercepted internal human communications, expecting screams, panic, or rage. What they heard instead chilled them. Section 3 breached. Continue to advance. Reactor overload in 90 seconds. Finish the upload. Tell command the data is secure. No please. No hesitation. Only calm. A Council intelligence officer replayed one transmission again and again. A human commander, voice strained but steady, speaking to their crew as alarms blared in the background. We knew the cost, the humans said. We choose it anyway. The station exploded moments later. The Council fleet continued firing. They were winning. The human fleet was being destroyed at an unsustainable rate. And yet, something was wrong. Council coordination began to slip. Orders arrived late or not at all. Command relays failed one by one. Automated defenses stopped responding as expected. Human boarding teams were dying in vast numbers. But the systems they touched stayed broken. Council commanders demanded reports. Technicians had no answers. The humans were not attacking the world. They were attacking the idea that the Council could control a battle. The realization came too late. Humanity had accepted from the beginning that this fight would cost them everything. They had planned around that. This was not a battle meant to be won by survival. It was meant to be won by sacrifice. Deep within the human fleet, a reserve group waited. They had not fired a shot. They had not moved. They were watching. When the Council fleet committed fully, when every reserve was deployed, when every escape route was sealed, that reserve group accelerated. They were not warships. They were carriers. Each one held thousands of smaller vessels, crewed not by elite soldiers, but by volunteers, men and women who had signed their names knowing they would not return. The carriers split open, releasing a swarm that overwhelmed sensors and point defenses through sheer volume. Council gunners fired until barrels melted. Still, the swarm came. The smaller craft latched onto everything: ships, stations, relays, and detonated in controlled blasts designed to cripple, not annihilate. Human voices filled intercepted channels. Objective complete. Data transferred. Proceeding as planned. Council command finally understood. This was not the main assault. It never had been. The humans were buying time. Time for something else to move. Far from the battle, in the darkness between systems, human fleets struck targets the Council had left undefended. Emergency coordination hubs, backup command centers, succession archives. The battle at the core world was a distraction paid for with human lives. When the council finally ordered a withdrawal, they discovered there was nowhere to withdraw to. Their infrastructure was gone. Their backups were destroyed. Their authority shattered. The core world survived. Barely. The council fleet did not. As the last human ship in the system lost power, drifting amid debris, a council officer boarded the wreckage. Inside, they found a dying human commander. The alien demanded to know why. Why sacrifice so much for a single battle? The human looked at them, eyes unfocused but calm. This wasn't one battle, the human said quietly. This was the cost of being heard. The commander died. The officer returned to their ship in silence. Across the galaxy, council species felt the consequences almost immediately. Orders contradicted each other. Defense responses lagged. Worlds waited for decisions that never came. The council still existed in name, but its voice was gone, and the most terrifying realization spread among those who survived. Humanity had been willing to bleed itself nearly dry, not to conquer territory, not to rule, but to break a system that had once decided they were expendable. They had not fought like conquerors. They had fought like people who had already accepted loss, and that made them unstoppable. The Galactic Council still existed. That was the cruelest part. The chambers were intact. The seals held. The banners still hung from the vaulted ceilings. Delegates still arrived, still argued, still demanded order. But something essential was missing. Authority. Messages sent from the council no longer carried weight. Fleets hesitated before obeying. Member worlds delayed compliance. Some ignored directives entirely, claiming confusion, loss of verification, or conflicting orders. All of it was true. The human strikes had not destroyed the council's armies. They had destroyed its certainty. Emergency sessions were called daily. Each one grew louder, shorter, and less productive than the last. Species accused one another of failure. Old grudges resurfaced. Alliances frayed. And through it all, one question echoed in every chamber. What do humans want? No one could answer, because the humans were not talking. Human fleets continued to move through council space, but not as an invasion force. As a presence, they appeared near key systems, then vanished. They destroyed nothing for weeks, then struck 3 targets in a single day. They allowed some worlds to prepare defenses, and bypassed them entirely to strike something else. Council strategists tried to predict their next move. They failed every time. Because human planning did not aim for reaction, it aimed to collapse. The first species to break away from the council did so quietly. They announced a temporary suspension of obligations, citing uncertain governance. Within days, 3 more followed. Trade agreements unraveled. Mutual defense pacts were ignored. The council called this sedition. Humans called it momentum. For the first time in its history, the council attempted direct negotiation with humanity. A delegation was assembled under white banners. Neutral vessels were prepared. Translators were triple-checked. The message was simple. Talk to us. The human response came 6 hours later. A single transmission. Short. Unencrypted. We already did. No coordinates. No follow-up. The delegation never launched. Fear spread through council space. Not the sharp fear of invasion, but a deeper one. Irrelevance. Species that had once relied on council arbitration began settling disputes on their own. Some armed themselves. Others sought private alliances. The galaxy was fragmenting, and humanity was doing nothing to stop it. Human fleets remained disciplined, silent, focused. They avoided unnecessary engagements. They avoided civilian targets entirely. This confused many council observers. If humans wanted revenge, why show restraint now? The answer lay buried in human doctrine. This was not punishment. This was a demonstration. The council was summoned again, this time not by itself, but by necessity. A quorum barely formed. Delegates arrived exhausted, frightened, desperate for clarity. Then the chamber lights dimmed. Not to red, to black. Emergency power was held, but the central display activated on its own. A human emblem appeared. Simple, unadorned. No triumph, no threat. Just presence. For the first time since the attacks began, humanity spoke to the galaxy. The voice was human. Older. Calm. Tired. You asked what we wanted, the voice said. The chamber was silent. We want what you denied us, the voice continued. Not protection. No apology. A pause. We want consequence. The display changed. Council records appeared, votes, resolutions, classifications, documents thought lost, erased, or forgotten. Highlighted among them was a single decision. Sol System, status adjustment. The chamber erupted. Some delegates shouted in denial. Others stared in horror as their own signatures appeared on the record, or the signatures of predecessors they had inherited power from. The human voice continued, relentless but controlled. You decided silence was acceptable, it said. You decided absence was harmless. You decided we were manageable. Another pause. You were wrong. The display shifted again. Live feeds appeared across the galaxy. Worlds in disorder, fleets stranded without coordination, trade lanes broken, local conflicts erupting without mediation. This is not destruction, the voice said. This is what happens when the system that holds everything together is revealed to be optional. A council elder stood, voice shaking. You are tearing the galaxy apart. No, the human replied. We are stepping back and letting it show what it was always held together with. The feed cut. The chamber remained dark. When the lights returned, the human emblem was gone. Panic spread. Some delegates demanded immediate surrender. Others called for total war. Several worlds announced withdrawal from council authority within hours of the broadcast. The council tried to rally its remaining strength. It failed. Too many fleets were out of position. Too many commanders questioned orders. Too many worlds no longer believed the council could protect them. Human fleets did not advance on the council core immediately. They waited. Because the final stage did not require violence. It required realization. One by one, council systems stopped reporting in, not due to attack, but due to choice. Worlds declared neutrality. Others armed themselves independently. Some openly aligned with humanity, believing cooperation was safer than loyalty to a failing institution. The council still had ships. It still had weapons. But it no longer had a galaxy willing to follow. A senior council strategist finally spoke the truth during a closed session. They never needed to destroy us, the strategist said. They only needed to prove we could be ignored. The room fell silent. Outside, human fleets are repositioned, not around planets, but around routes. Corridors. Junctions. They were not blocking movement. They were watching it. The message was clear. The council could exist, but only as something irrelevant. The final emergency session convened with fewer than half the original members present. Many seats were empty, some permanently. A final message was drafted. An apology, an offer of reparations, a recognition of wrongdoing. It was transmitted on every frequency humanity had ever used. The response came quickly. Too quickly. This was never about words, the human reply stated. This was about what happens after them. The council chamber trembled as something massive exited hyperspace nearby. Sensors screamed. Energy readings spiked beyond known thresholds. A fleet, larger than any humanity had yet revealed, was forming outside the core system. Not an attack formation. In encirclement. A junior officer whispered the thought no one wanted to voice. They're not here to destroy us. The senior strategist finished it. They're here to end us. Not by force. By example. As human ships settled into position, silent and patient, the council finally understood the full scope of its error. Humanity had never wanted a seat at the table. They wanted to show the galaxy what happened when the table decided some voices did not matter. And now, with the galaxy already slipping from its grasp, the council faced a future more terrifying than annihilation. A future where it was no longer necessary. The galaxy did not end. That was what shocked them most. Stars still burned. Trade still moved, slowly and unevenly. Worlds still turned beneath unfamiliar skies. Life continued. Only the council was gone. Not destroyed in fire. Not shattered by a final, glorious battle. Gone in a quieter, more terrifying way. From the perspective of the surviving species, it happened in stages. First came the waiting. Human fleets surrounded the council core system, but they did not fire. They did not transmit threats. They did not even demand surrender. They simply stayed, silent, watchful, unmoving. Days passed, then weeks. Council delegates remained trapped inside their own capital, arguing, panicking, drafting statements that no one outside cared to receive anymore. Fleets that once would have rushed to defend the council hesitated. Some turned back. Others claimed fuel shortages, command confusion, or local emergencies. All excuses. All true. The galaxy had learned how to function without permission. The second stage was realization. Outlying worlds stopped sending taxes. Defense pacts expired and were not renewed. Trade agreements dissolved as worlds negotiated directly with one another, bypassing council channels entirely. No one asked if this was allowed. They simply did it. Human fleets did not interfere. They did not enforce order. They did not exploit the chaos. They observed. That observation frightened the galaxy more than conquest ever could, because it meant humanity was confident the outcome no longer required them. The third stage came when the council attempted to reassert itself. A final broadcast was sent, one last declaration of authority, warning of consequences for disobedience. The message barely traveled. Relays ignored it. Worlds blocked it. Some species never received it at all. And when no punishment followed, the illusion finally broke. The council was not defeated. It was irrelevant. The perspective shifts to a single alien observer, a mid-level official from a species that had once relied heavily on council protection. Their world had prospered under the old system. They had voted with the council, benefited from its silence. Now, they watched from orbit as the council capital dimmed, power levels dropping, internal systems failing one by one. Human ships remained in place. Patient. The observer accessed historical records, trying to understand what they had missed. They found Earth, not as a threat profile, as a footnote. A minor species marked unstable, non-essential, manageable. The observer felt something cold settle in their core. Humanity had been dismissed not because it was weak, but because it was inconvenient. And inconvenience had been mistaken for insignificance. Inside the council capital, delegates finally made the only decision left to them. They opened all channels. They begged, not for mercy, for relevance. A human response came at last. It was not from a politician or a general. It was from a human fleet logistics coordinator. The voice was calm, almost gentle. The council asked once what humanity would contribute to the galaxy. The human said, "This is our answer." The transmission ended. No conditions. No ultimatums. The human fleets began to move. Not inward. Outward. They disengaged from the council system and departed in multiple directions, leaving the capital intact, powerless, and alone. The council still existed, but no one followed it. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the next catastrophe. It did not come. Humanity did not seize territory. They did not install governors. They did not replace the council with themselves. They withdrew, but they did not disappear. Human fleets positioned themselves along major junctions, not blocking travel, not controlling trade, simply present. A reminder. Worlds that once ignored Earth now studied human doctrine, trying to understand what had happened. They discovered the truth too late. Humanity has never been the strongest species. They had never been the most advanced. They had been the most patient. They had endured extinction-level attacks without help. They had rebuilt without allies. They had planned across generations while the galaxy planned across election cycles. They did not need to win every battle. They only needed to refuse to quit. The alien observer watched reports stream in from across known space. Local coalitions formed. New councils rose and fell. Some worlds thrived. Others collapsed. Through it all, human fleets remained distant and disciplined. They intervened rarely. Only when something threatened to become another council. Only when a system began deciding that some voices did not matter. The observer finally understood the deepest horror. Humanity was not a conqueror. Conquerors ruled through fear. Humanity ruled through memory. They remembered every unanswered call, every delayed vote, every silent corridor where help should have been. And they had taught the galaxy the cost of forgetting. Years later, a new generation of alien leaders studied history. They learned of the council not as a golden age, but as a warning. They learned of humanity not as monsters, but as something far more dangerous. A species that would suffer everything, and still stand. The final scene returns to deep space. A lone alien vessel drifts near a human patrol route. Its captain watches massive human ships pass in silence, scarred, functional, enduring. No flags, no symbols of dominance. Just ships that look like they have survived things no one else would. The captain records a final log entry, voice unsteady. "We once believed humans were weak because they asked for help," the captain says. "We believed they were safe to ignore." A pause. "We were wrong. The human ships vanish into the dark, moving on to somewhere else, some other quiet task that will shape the future without announcement. The captain finishes the log with a single conclusion. The galaxy did not break humanity. Humanity endured the galaxy. And every species that remains understands the truth now. Not shouted, not enforced, simply proven. Humans are terrifying.